just by this wave of a hand. I mean, how much chemistry has to take place to have a body plan change like that?
Welcome to biology, Jim.
Yeah, biology infuriates me.
Yeah, it should. Look, my father was a chemist.
All right, you should have followed in his footsteps.
I know exactly how you feel because I used to hear it all the time. Biology is different. It does other things that chemistry doesn't do. What standard biologists would say is, yeah, evolution. Evolution doesn't occur anywhere else except in biology. So, that does it. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's not the whole story. There's so many things in biology that do not make sense to a chemist or a physicist.
Well, I have with me today Dr. Sy Garte, and we've had him on the channel before. It's actually been about 5 years, almost 5 years since I had him on the channel. And Sy got his PhD in biochemistry. He's a PhD in biochemistry, and he's the author of the award-winning book, The Works of His Hands, A Scientist's Journey from Atheism to Faith. Sy also had another book just last year come out called Science and Faith in Harmony, Contemplations on a Distilled Doxology. What we're going to be discussing today is his book called Beyond Evolution, How New Discoveries in the Science of Life Point to God. So he's been writing a lot lately. He's been a professor at New York University, at the University of Pittsburgh, and a visiting professor at Rutgers University, where he is currently. He's held leadership positions at the National Institutes of Health, Uniformed Services University. Sy's published over 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and 5 books, as well as articles on science and faith. And he's also the editor-in-chief of the ASA, which is the American Scientific Affiliation's quarterly magazine called God and Nature. And he's a fellow of the ASA and vice president of the Washington, D.C. Metro Chapter. And he also serves as a lay leader in the Methodist Church. Sy was raised in an atheist Marxist home, and he was baptized about 13 years ago. And as I recall, Sy, I think you come from a ethnically Jewish background, although your parents were not practicing Jews. They were really atheists and even Marxists. Have I got that right?
Yep. All right.
Everything is right. Okay.
Yep.
And let me introduce your book here. This is an introduction to Beyond Evolution. Sy makes the case for the disunity within the church over the reality of evolution, and he argues that there need not be this disunity in the church. What happens is there's some people that are what are called theistic evolutionists, and that's what I think the camp that Sy would broadly call himself in, that he believes very much in God, but that God had set evolution into motion, and then it progressed from there. And then you have another camp that may be more on the creationist side, and where they very much believe in God, and that God had a constant hand. So rather than kicking this off, that there were constant new events that were occurring, and sometimes it's called progressive creationists. God created, God then created another and another thing. Whereas in evolution, it's more God set the thing off from the theistic evolution standpoint, and then it progressed from there. So if you look at it, there's really only subtle differences, but people are willing to fight to the death over this. And that's not unusual for people in the church. I mean, there's groups that fight to the death over whether the bread is really the physical body or not. Is the cup is it just wine or grape juice, or is it really the blood of Christ? And people have fought to the death over that. So it's not unusual for people within the church to have big arguments over things that people in the world look at and just scratch their heads and like, can't you guys just get along a little bit better? What's the big deal? So, but I get a lot of email traffic from people that feel that I'm in one camp or the other, and since I'm not in their camp, I'm heretical or I'm stupid. So the people who think that I don't embrace evolution, if they think I don't embrace evolution, they look at me as being stupid. If they think that I don't embrace, a literal 6-day creation, I'm not just stupid, but I'm a heretic and I'm going to go to hell as a result of this. So people have very strong views on this, and we're going to kind of talk about this today because Sy has written a book on how we might be able to get along and all this. So Sy, I've given you a very long introduction. You take it from here.
Well, I have to say, Jim, I mean, I'm totally on board with everything you just said, and I get the same emails that you get. Maybe not as many, but I get quite a few. And, you know, what you said is true. I mean, if we look at Acts chapter 15, we see maybe the first recorded issue of division in the early church, where the question was the Judaizers versus people like Paul and Peter, who wanted to make it easier for people to come into the new faith, whereas others were saying, well, they have to be circumcised, they have to follow the dietary laws. And that was a big controversy in the Jerusalem Council. And it was resolved with a compromise. James, if I remember this correctly, I'm not a biblical scholar, but James was able to say, why don't we just, say you can't eat meat sacrificed to idols and let everything else go. And everybody agreed. And they sent a message down to Antioch to tell the church there that that's the decision. So, but yes, there are always controversies. Even within a single denomination, there are controversies.
Yeah.
The Methodist Church just split in two over a controversy. So,
doesn't it sort of keep splitting? It's sort of like a nuclear process. It splits.
Well, it split for a while, then it came together to make the United Methodist Church, and now there are two different United Methodist churches. So it's crazy. But my point, and the point I make in the book, is that evolution is really not an issue that should be tearing people apart. And I mean, and I think this is true for you as well, Jim. I have friends who are young earth creationists, and we argue and we debate, but it doesn't have anything to do with our friendship. It doesn't mean that we don't like each other or that we yell at each other. I recently had a very interesting session with Sean McDowell, who also had on Douglas Axe. Doug is a member of the Discovery Institute, and he's very opposed to evolution. And so, but it wasn't a debate. It was more of a discussion. And we did disagree about some things with evolution, but we ended up as friends. And he made one point, which I contested. And then he told me to look it up, and I did. And I told him later that he was right, in fact. So, that's the spirit I think we need to, and this is the spirit, as you well know, that should also prevail in science, right? Mm-hmm. People don't agree all the time. They disagree. Right. And it doesn't mean that they're lifelong enemies, because eventually one of the two sides is going to be proven right or wrong, through other experiments and through further work. So we need to apply that, I think, in the faith as well. And because there is one truth, we don't know what it is, but we know it's the truth of Jesus. And we know Jesus is the truth.
Yes.
And if we all agree on that, it's only a matter of time before everything else will be clear.
Yeah,
and
things fade in comparison to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is the basis behind our faith.
That's
if this were 500 years ago, Sy, it would be a whole different argument. The argument would be, does the Earth really spin around an axis, and does the Earth revolve around the sun?
Right.
That would be the argument. And there's not too many fixed earthers left. There's few left, because they were standing upon a verse. Psalm 104, verse 5 says, "He set the earth on its foundations.
Right.
It can never be moved."
Yeah.
Now, on that basis, people were arguing the earth does not move. It says it right here. I mean, what more do you want? It says it right here. It says it can never be moved. It's been set on foundations. It can never be moved. So they had a good argument from Scripture. Mm-hmm. But I think most people are convinced that the earth does rotate about an axis, and the earth does rotate about the sun. people have moved. They've changed in where they are. So this is no longer this fixed earther is no longer the argument. Whereas people had a verse that they were standing on,
Right.
and so things change and views change, and so that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think the other thing to say about evolution, though, the point I make in the book, is that most people who are arguing about evolution on both sides don't really get it right, and that's because it keeps changing. The modern views of evolution, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. There's new ideas about evolution that are completely new, and a lot of people don't know about them.
Oh yeah, they don't, and it's completely different from what I learned in school. What I learned in evolution is there was this slow progression where you had random mutation and natural selection.
That's it.
We're behind the changes in life here, but the definition of evolution has evolved, and so
Yes.
why don't you go and tell us some of these newer interpretations of what evolution is?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I also often like to point out is this book that was published 2 years ago by MIT Press, and the authors and editors, it's a very scholastic academic book, and the authors and editors are mainstream scientists, and I don't think any of them are Christians, or at least not professing Christians. And it's called Evolution on Purpose. That title would have been prohibited a few years ago.
Never out of MIT.
Never out of MIT, exactly. Yeah. And now it's almost becoming mainstream. Now, I'm still getting a lot of pushback because there's still, it takes a long time for a new paradigm to be accepted. And people are still saying, oh, no, that's not science. There's no purpose in science. Well, my response to that is you're absolutely right if you're talking about physics and chemistry. There's no volcano decides to erupt and then erupts. No molecule says, oh, that looks like a nice molecule over there. I think I'll go bind to it. No, there are laws of chemistry that they follow. But biology is not like that. In biology, we have agency. We can will to do, we meaning all of life, not just humans. Little bacteria have agency and they have purpose and they act according to their purpose. And and I'm not just saying this as a philosophical idea. This comes from at least a decade of new experiments using bacteria and showing that they do act with a purpose. And not only that, and this is what's really amazing, they have cognition. And that fact that bacteria can sense the environment, can interact with other bacteria, can avoid enemies, can even remember that some things go together and act accordingly. No brains here, no neurons. This is amazing.
These are single-cell organisms.
Yeah.
Single cells.
Single cells. And it has led to a new a thing called cognition-based evolution. Think of that.
This is actually the chapter that struck me most. I think it was chapter 4.
Yes.
This whole thing of agency and a cell. So just unpack this for us, because I found that fascinating and I found it so interesting. I ended up doing other reading on it because I wanted to understand this, because I had not heard that
Nobody has.
A single cell has some sort of agency. So tell us more about this.
Well, I mean, this is not widespread knowledge, even in the scientific biological community. There are about, I would say, a dozen groups working in these areas, and they're publishing in good journals, but it hasn't spread very much. I happen to be interested in it, so I found it. I found this work. There's a great review. One of the papers I reference is by Pamela Lyon, who reviews this in a beautiful way. As well as this book, which I mentioned. Now, the interesting thing about the book is it's free to download. So if you want to look at it, it's $75 to purchase, but it's free to download.
Which book is this?
This is the book from MIT.
The MIT Press book. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can download it. Now, it's very technical. It's not written for the general public, but you would have no problem with it. So I think what's happening is that these experiments, these people working on this, are people who have been pioneers. One of the editors, for example, is Dennis Noble, and he's been a pioneer in the new biology, which says, it's not gene centrism is not the thing anymore. It's not just genes. There's a lot of other very complex things going on in living cells besides, genes turning on and making proteins, etc. And there are so many areas of evolution that are questioning the original neo-Darwinist paradigm, which has been static for about I'd say 2 or 3 decades. There's been no changes. Little additions have come along now and then, but now it's a revolution. This is a paradigm shift, is what we're beginning to see. Now, it's very much at the beginning. I think my book is the first one that I know of that is presenting this material, but it won't be the last.
So tell us a little bit about more what it is. I mean, you told us about Dennis Noble. What are the features of a single cell organism that it does when you say it has agency? What does it do? If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email, tour@drjamestour.org, and we will get together, and I will share with you about why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus.
So, a single-cell organism, I'll give you one example from an experiment that was done. If you take, I don't remember the type of but some type of bacteria, if the oxygen level in its environment goes down, it switches to a different kind of metabolism, less, not oxygen dependent or less oxygen dependent, and it survives. Now, suppose you raise the temperature in the environment where the bacteria are, and then half an hour later you lower the oxygen level. If you keep doing that, the bacteria will begin to realize how they do this, nobody knows. They begin to realize that the temperature going up comes just before the oxygen goes down. And at some point, after doing this a few times, they begin to switch their metabolism to deal with the oxygen change before it happens. It's like Pavlov's dogs. They hear the bell, they know the food is coming. So how this happens is very strange. Now, they can sense the environment, they can sense temperature, they can sense oxygen levels, they can sense the presence of various molecules, etc. But then how do they put all this together and figure out, that, okay, the temperature has gone up, that means the oxygen's going to go down, let's switch now. And they all do. And we don't know how they do that.
So we don't know how they do that. Let me ask a question. I'm not really even making a hypothesis on how they do this, but let me ask, because maybe you can just rule this out, that this can't be it. We work with a lot of bacteria in my own lab because we use these little nano machines to drill into them and kill them. And bacteria are amazing things because what they can do is they can exchange DNA between each other. Right. They have these little tubules that'll go out and share, and then there's these sometimes in the biofilm environment they share DNA. And so if one bacterium happens to have some genetic modifications that predispose it to doing well at low oxygen, high temperature or something, and it starts doing much better than its other neighbors, it will end up sharing its DNA with its other neighbors. And then you see the whole community then has this new DNA from that one one guy that had this. He or she has shared this with, they don't have genders, they shared this with others. So it could have something to do with that, or is that ruled out?
No, that's one of the hypotheses. In fact, that it's gene transfer.
Gene transfer, right?
Which is allowing this to happen. And I don't know the literature well at this point, but I've read that that's one of the hypotheses. Another hypothesis is that there's a region in some of these bacteria in one of the areas near the membrane that has a lot of receptors gathered together. And they even call it a nanobrain, which is weird. But one group calls that a nanobrain, and they think that somehow this is an extremely active metabolic area where there's a lot of things going on, and that's all. They don't know what is going on because that's very difficult to parse out. But I think the horizontal gene transfer is definitely part of it. I mean, that is, as you said, that is an amazing feature of most bacteria. They do that.
Yeah, which is why they're so insidious in trying to knock them out. Because what happens is you happen to have one, so that when you take antibiotics, you're encouraged to complete the entire antibiotic regime. You don't stop when you start feeling better, because what happens is if you stop, say, 2/3 of the way through, you will have a few bacteria that were really resistant to that.
Yeah.
And so they're still alive. And now what happens, because they're still alive, they will start propagating, and only those bacteria will start coming, the ones that were resistant. And now you get a bacterial infection that's much more resilient than the one that you originally had. And this happens, and remember, bacteria double in population every 20 minutes.
Correct.
So that's why you can be feeling fine this morning, and by this afternoon you're like, oh, I feel terrible.
You got a few million bacteria running around.
Yeah, it just doubles and doubles every 20 minutes. And so these things are really, really amazing what they can do.
Yeah. So, I mean, the general idea of all of this is that we tend to underrate things like bacteria, single cells, even plants, and even very primitive animals. They have all of life, from bacteria up, have this ability to do things on their own. They're not simply, nothing alive. It simply follows the regular laws of physics and chemistry and nothing else. There's something in addition in biology, in life. And, we don't know what that is. I mean, I think that a clue is the idea of purpose. The concept that Dawkins and other atheists have said, that the universe is without meaning or purpose, no design, no good or evil. That's obviously false. That cannot be true, because we're here, we're alive, we're part of life, and we have purpose, and we have agency, and we have good and evil, we have morality, and we have, all the things that make this a beautiful universe. But it's not just us. It's all of life has this to some degree.
Mm-hmm. So I could see the materialist arguing vociferously with you about this idea of purpose from a single cell organism.
Right.
A human being, you can say, okay, a human being may come with an argument of purpose. And they really cut themselves off at the knees when they start saying humans don't have purpose. But
they do say that.
Yeah, they do say that. But to say that a cell has a purpose, this is a much more modern concept, right?
Yeah.
And is this being said in the context of evolution?
Yes. Okay, that's why the book is titled Evolution on Purpose. What it's suggesting is that, we as you said, the older, more traditional view of evolution is that it's blind, has it's just chance,
random
and physical,
mutation. Yeah.
Right, and that's not true. Apparently that is not true. There is a two-way street in evolution. So the organism, and this is called niche construction. It's an idea that has gotten a lot of support from mainstream biologists. The idea that the animal, the organism, affects the environment, and the environment affects the organism. That we know, because that's natural selection. But it also goes the other way. The organism can change the environment, and that in turn helps it evolve in a certain way. And you can just think of the classic example is beavers. Beavers change their environment. They make dams, and they change the entire environment. They create new levels of water, and they create different plants that are able to live in those ponds, in the beaver ponds, which they can eat. So, it's a two-way street. And somebody like James Shapiro talks about this a lot. He calls it natural genetic engineering as opposed to natural selection. And what that means is organisms can engineer their own genomes to do things that they want to do or need to do, but to survive or to prosper, or whatever. So it's not so simple as we used to think. And that makes sense scientifically, because I don't know any field of science that is simple. And in fact, the more we discover about anything, the more complex it gets, not the simpler it gets. And this is certainly true of life and true of everything involved.
Dennis Noble is a polymath. I mean, he's a very smart man.
He's amazing.
And but he's quite old. Yeah. And so he can get away saying things like this because he's not raising grant money. He's not a 30-year-old young professor starting as an assistant professor that has to toe the party line, that has to say what is the consensus view, or else he'll be excluded, or else he'll lose his or her or she will lose her grant money. So there is a place for the older ones to come out and start saying things because they're not threatened by the system anymore.
That's me. Yeah. I'm retired.
Yeah. And so you can come out and say these sort of things. And there's other people that get beat up in their careers when they
for sure.
come out against the party line here. Yeah. Now
there are a few very, very smart younger folks who are pioneers in this. One is named Michael Levin. He's got a chapter in that book. He's a brilliant guy.
Is this the one from Tufts?
There are several others.
Is he at Tufts University?
Oh, I forgot where he is. He might be. Okay. I think he's in New England, yeah. He's got all kinds of ideas. But the good part is this. These are people they're not just coming up with ideas and thoughts. They're doing the work. They're doing the experiments. Mm-hmm. They've got published papers that back up what they're saying. They're not making it up. But there's still a lot of resistance, because something you just said is very important. Biology traditionally has had a huge amount of ideology attached to it, dogma, right? And part of that
you're a biologist, right? So you can...
I'm a biochemist, actually, but I consider myself more on the biological side.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason I say that is because you're a member of that group, so you're free to speak like that, in a sense.
More or less, yeah. As a matter of, what's really funny about this book, this is an aside, by the way, but what you just said made me think of it. This book has been out for about a week, but even before it came out and up till now, it's been doing quite well in sales. And what's amazing is one of the categories that the book is in is just biochemistry, just straight biochemistry. Mm-hmm. And it's been number one in new releases in biochemistry for about, the whole month.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm just wondering how some of the atheist biochemists feel about a book that has God in the title as number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They might not be happy.
No, I don't think they're going to be happy at all.
They won't like that.
Tell me about this chapter, Human Behavior and Consciousness.
Yeah. So, when you were talking about me as a evolutionary creationist, theistic evolutionist, that's where I came from, but I don't completely fit that model, because I don't think God set up evolution and then that's it, because I don't think evolution applies everywhere in life. It certainly doesn't apply to the origin of life. You and I have talked about that, and we certainly are on exactly the same page. But I don't think it applies to the evolution of human beings either. I don't think humans can be defined by evolution because we have characteristics and qualities that cannot be explained by any evolutionary principle.
Every biologist explains human beings evolutionarily.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
That's what they do, and they're wrong. Because you know why? They say, take morality, for example. So why do human beings really care?
We developed it because it strengthens the community, they would say.
Exactly.
Because of you, millions of people have heard the gospel. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that he's risen from the dead, and you will be saved. That's right. That's the requirement. We talk about science concepts which draw people in. Take these nanomachines and have them drill into cells. This would be a great way to kill cancer, right? We also talk about Jesus Christ, who's the best in everything. My faith in Jesus Christ means more to me than anything. If you could continue to give or give for the first time, we would certainly appreciate it. You can go to jesusandScience.org/donate. All U.S. donations are tax deductible. Thank you so much.
That is not science. Sorry. There's no genes that have been associated with this. People keep trying, but they don't get it. It doesn't work.
They would say that the people that are more supportive of society, they live longer because they live in tribes and groups that protect themselves. So those are the ones whose DNA there's more of, and the other ones, they die off in wars and everything because they're loners and they get killed. So right. I mean, this is their just so stories, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that what they say?
That's what it is. It's a just so story. It's not science, but it is dogma. You'll hear, as you said, you'll hear this from everybody.
Everybody,
but I don't believe it.
But they couch it in the terms of that's the DNA that propagates. So in that way, they're taking a scientific advantage.
But
so,
Jim,
so they are saying it. So what's wrong with that?
If that's the DNA that propagates, show me the DNA. Now I'm going to sound like you.
Yeah.
Right? You always say, show me the reaction, right?
Yes,
I'm going to say, show me the DNA. Where's the gene that does this? Mm-hmm. If you're talking about evolution, and you're talking about evolution of any kind, a limb changes from a fin to a bone to an arm, you can find the genes that did that. Whenever you're looking at a real evolutionary change, whatever it is, there are genes involved. There's no gene involved in being nice. Not one gene. There may be several, like 1,000 genes that altogether do something with behavior. But behavioral genetics is a very difficult subject. There are a few cases, quite a few cases, where one gene being mutated causes a big change in behavior. And that's a genetic disease, usually, which means it's less than 1% of the population. And, and we understand that. But that's nothing to do with evolution, because you're talking about people being nicer, being kinder, loving, whatever. There are no genes for that ever been proposed. There's one polymorphism in one gene called the oxytocin receptor gene, which has been associated with maternal or kind instincts, etc. But if you look into that carefully, you find out that it's not a very strong argument. And I can't go into details because it's very, very technical. But there are other alleles that do other things in the same gene. So there's no way you could imagine having a population with just that change that then spreads to the population, because those alleles are not even, they're in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, which means they're not under selection pressure. So they can't have anything to do with evolution. This is what I'm saying is, yes, it sounds like a great story, but there's so many things that people talk about in evolution that are just so stories that they have no actual scientific evidence for. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's the same thing when you're talking about, how do we get ribose? They'll come up with all kinds of, interesting chemical reactions. And then you have to go tell them Sorry, that doesn't happen in nature. You need a chemist to do that, right? And this is the same kind of analogy, is that, yeah, it sounds great, but it's not backed up by anything scientific. And, how are you going to explain, when I ask some of these people, how do you explain the music of Bach or Beethoven or the Beatles, or how do you explain that? And they say, oh, that's easy. Birds sing, animals beat on things to make. Come on. There's something different about humans, and it's not easily extrapolatable from anything related to evolution. So I believe, as a matter of fact, and our mutual friend Josh Swamidass wrote a book about the genealogical
who
Adam and Eve, and I believe that humans are a creation of God. I mean, I'm a creationist. I'm not an evolutionist when it comes to our species.
Huh. So you've evolved, it seems.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a totally off-topic question, but because I've got a biochemist, and I don't always get biochemists that will speak with me, because they usually stay far away from me, and people. It started with Mary Higby Schweitzer.
Oh, I know her.
I've spoken with her. So she found proteins from dinosaurs. So there are these dinosaurs that are 60 to 80 million years ago.
Right.
They're finding proteins, collagen, and as a chemist, I could see, maybe these proteins, these polyamides remaining for thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands, but for tens of millions of years, they're still there.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they all have the same canonical 20 amino acids.
Yes.
It's not like in the last 100 million years we've had a change. No, it's the same amino acids that were used then for dinosaurs are used in people.
Yeah.
And so then they're finding this. Now, let me position this so that you understand what I'm getting at. Some people have a worldview that absolutely excludes God. And because of this, they can't even entertain a thought of an intelligent designer. And so all of their science comes with that predetermined structure.
Right.
All right. So everything is there. And so everything has to have a 100% purely materialistic standpoint because they've come with a certain worldview.
Absolutely.
Now, if scientists were to come with a hard and fast worldview, the physicists have told us they can go right back to the origin point of the universe at 14-point-something billion years ago, and of the Earth 4.8 billion years ago.
Right.
They can go back to that. And because we have that stake in the ground set there by the astrophysicists that have given us these dates, could it be skewing our worldview that we see this sign right in front of us? There are proteins, there is collagen, there is hemoglobin that is in dinosaurs. From dinosaur fossils, they're finding the collagen, these proteins, and even structure of soft tissue, eyes, not a full eye, but structures from the eye of dinosaurs. Will we say, therefore, well, then these molecules can indeed survive 60 to 80 million years because there's no way it could be different? Or would it be advantageous to at least entertain the thought maybe dinosaurs lived a lot more recently than we would think? You see what I'm saying? If we come with this mantra that it cannot be, are we excluding something when we see this sign? Flesh that out for me. How do you think about something like this?
Well, I agree with your general proposition that there is dogma which rules things out that should not be ruled out. And that includes some of the things I've said: ruled out teleology, ruled out purpose, ruled out agency, ruled out cognition, ruled out everything that looks like, it disobeys physics and chemistry because you don't have it there, but you do have it in life. So that, in general, I agree with that. In terms of the specific question of dinosaurs, there's a huge amount of evidence that they're very old, and it's comes from geology, paleontology, things that I'm not an expert in and I can't really answer. But in terms of the soft tissue, which is generally, that's what is usually referred to as soft tissue, which almost always, crystallizes, it fossilizes, it turns into rock, into stone. There are two main theories that I know of, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but one theory is that it's possible that in some cases, because this is not a common event, it's fairly rare, but in some cases there are parts of bones that are encased in such a way that there's absolutely no opening. There's no possibility for any air to get in, or any bacteria or anything else to get into the bone. And then it's basically preserved. It's as if you're preserving something in a sealed chamber. That's one theory. Another theory is that it could be, and this is something that that Mary has argued very persuasively against. It could be that it is due to contamination from the outside once it was opened. She's done experiments to show that that's not the case. So I don't think that is the case, although some people are still saying that. Mm-hmm. Now, could it be that, in fact, dinosaurs are new and young? Well, then you have a lot of other things you have to explain. Why are their bones found at a particular geological level and not any higher? And that's
there's young earthers that would say, well, because it's a young Earth. I mean,
yes,
that's their model.
But young Earth has got so many problems. I mean, I can't even begin to go through them. I just have heard them over and over again, and I haven't heard any great responses from young Earth creationists. So
it's interesting. I just was throwing it out there, Sy, because I wonder how much I, as a scientist, have put a stake in the ground, and that stake should be a lot looser than I have made it, because I bought into certain arguments.
Yeah, I think that's a generally good point. And the whole idea of scientific heresy, which is what I'm committing, and some people would say you're committing as well, right? Is a terrible term, because by definition, there should never be any heresy in science. The term shouldn't exist, because if you could take any new idea, now some of the new ideas are all nonsense, of course. In fact, probably most of them are. But the ones that aren't were also accused of being heretics. And the answer is, well, how good is their data? So online yesterday, somebody accused me of being like, there's something called the Galileo syndrome, where everybody who comes up with a crazy idea says, well, Galileo, everybody thought he was wrong and he was right, and I'm just like Galileo. So, the Earth really is flat, or whatever crazy idea they have. And I said, yeah, you would be right if I had no references in this book, and I didn't refer to any experiments or any data, and that's not the case. So the point is that an idea like what you're just saying, right, about maybe the dinosaurs are younger, if you have good data to show that, then it's not crazy. But you have to have that. And that's how science works. I mean, I don't have to tell you. That's how science works. And we have to be able to change our minds when the data tells us you have to change your mind.
Yeah, and that's hard for all of us.
Yes, it is,
because we have certain expectations here. Let me turn to another thing. You kindly sent me a copy of your book, and I read your book within 2 or 3 days of receipt. You sent me the electronic, the PDF
Oh,
copy.
the PDF, right?
And then I was a little bit reluctant to do this interview, and because you and I disagree on this, the concept of evolution, because I always, as you say, I want to see the mechanism. Chemistry, organic chemistry is very precise.
Yeah.
We can go to the blackboard and put up a mechanism. And when somebody is discussing chemistry with me and they disagree with me, I right away want to go to a blackboard and say, show me. Show me how that works. And,
Right.
tell me about it. Go on. And when they don't go to the board, it reveals something that they really don't know.
Right.
And so when I read your book, let me give you an example. So on page 45, it says, so you describe how eyes, wings, social behavior arose many times independently. You conclude that these features, quote, are not explained by any evolutionary pathway, but must result from other unknown laws of biology, unquote. That appeal to an unspecific law substitutes for a casual account. I mean, I don't know how to make use of that. Help me out here.
Yeah. So what that comes from is, to put it in context, Stephen Jay Gould, who was a excellent evolutionary biologist, had famously said that evolution is completely random and blind. So anything can happen. In fact, he said, if we turn the clock back to the beginning of life and then let it play out, we would have something completely different than we have now, because it's all chance. It's only chance that we're here, that vertebrates are here, that mammals are here. It's all chance. Now, he didn't have any evidence for that. He just was going on the assumption that evolution is totally blind, random, and has no control. There's no controls over it. One of the world's leading paleontologists named Simon Conway Morris, he's an Englishman, has explored this in great depth. And what he's come up with is the idea of convergence. And what that means is that you often get, in fact, you get it hundreds of times, if not thousands, the same thing, the same structures in organisms which are not closely related at all, which means they came about independently. But it looks as if, and a page after you were quoting me, page 46, there's a picture, there's a figure of an octopus eye and a human eye, and you can't tell the difference. They look exactly the same. These are very complex structures, and one didn't give birth to the other, because octopuses are invertebrates and we're vertebrates, and that split was a very long time ago. So these occurred independently and they ended up the same thing. What's the chances of that? It's almost zero. So what his point is that there must be some laws, and these are often called structuralism, the structuralist laws. Michael Denton is a proponent of that. He's in the Discovery Institute as well. And what Morris says is that we don't know what those laws are, but we should try to find them, because that is a clue that there's more to evolution, there's more to biology than just random chance mutations and natural selection, because that will not explain how we and octopuses have the same kind of eyes. And it's not just the eyes. I mean, there are hundreds of examples. Wings. We have wings in insects, in birds, in bats. There's no phylogenetic connection between those animals, but they all develop the same kind of wings. They beat up and down. They create, an updraft so the organism can fly. On the other hand, there's nothing that flies using jets, because it's too hard. It doesn't work very well. Yeah. So what Morris is saying is we need to see how this happens. It's not blank. It's not completely random. There's something there. There's something, there's some principle behind this convergence that we don't know what it is.
Yeah, I become hypersensitive to the hand-waving arguments because I come from a science that's not biology. And so I try to be, so it strikes me. So, for example, page 52, you write that, quote, having a silent gene turned on and making proteins is basically equivalent to having a new functional gene appear, unquote.
Right.
So that stretches the concept of new gene creation into something that's much looser and sort of hand-waving, isn't it?
No.
No?
Gene regulation, whether a gene is active or not, is not hand-waving at all. It's a very well-known field of biochemistry. And it is, in other words, what I'm saying there is you can have differences in the way an organism functions based on whether the gene is expressed or not expressed. That's well known, and the mechanisms are known. So there's no hand-waving there. We know how that works.
Okay. All right. Let me. As I read through this book, I was constantly hit with this. It says on page 53, you write the entire genome of an aquatic organism was somehow duplicated, unquote.
Yeah.
And the descendants can mutate risk-free and, quote, rapidly developed new anatomical structures like a backbone, unquote, bringing vertebrates into existence in the form of a bony fish. Now, this is an extraordinary leap, isn't it? To go from invertebrate to a vertebrate, and just by this wave of a hand, I mean, how much chemistry has to take place to have a body plan change like that?
Yeah. So, okay. Welcome to biology, Jim.
Yeah. That's why biology infuriates me.
Yeah, it should. And it's look, my father was a chemist also. He was a physical chemist.
All right, you should have followed in his footsteps.
I was close, I didn't become a poet, but I know exactly how you feel because I used to hear it all the time. And one of the first things I say in this book is biology is different. Life is different. It doesn't follow the rules of it does follow the rules of chemistry. It doesn't disobey chemistry. But it does other things that chemistry doesn't do. And, we don't, what a lot of people would say, what standard biologists would say is, yeah, evolution doesn't occur anywhere else except in biology. So, that does it. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's not the whole story. There's so many things in biology that do not make sense to a chemist or a physicist. They just don't make sense.
They don't make sense to me. That's right.
We have metabolic pathways that do exactly the same thing, but we have 3 or 4 of them that do exactly the same. Why do we need that? Well, we know why we need it, but it gets very complicated.
No, but think about the chemistry, the chemical changes that are needed to have a body plan change of an invertebrate to a vertebrate. And how do you rationalize that and explain it in one sentence in a book where you're trying to say, that you're an evolutionist and you want us to somehow be somewhat accepting of this, and it just seems kind of odd that you would do that. Because to me, it seems like you're being just like many biologists that I know. They tell a just so story, and then I point something out. It couldn't have happened this way. And then all of a sudden they have a new just so story that in a nanosecond, they've come up with, which tells me there's very little basis behind any of your just so stories.
So what you're saying, I would put it this way. What you're saying is that compared to chemistry, and I'm not sure about physics, but certainly compared to chemistry, there is a huge amount that we don't fully know or understand in biology. A huge amount. What's remarkable is that we understand anything at all. We know about the genetic code. We know about how proteins are made. We know how enzymes work.
But
we know a lot.
Everything you're citing, you can reduce to chemistry.
Of course.
Everything you just cited, you reduce to chemistry.
Because that's what we know the best. In other words, what we know the best about life is the biochemistry, because it's chemical. So we know how a protein works because of chemistry.
But we don't know how a body plan evolves. So
Yes.
how can you so firmly take on this stance of pushing evolution? I'm not anti-evolution. I just say I don't understand it. I
Right.
don't understand it. How
I
can
don't
I
either.
support something that I don't understand?
Well, okay. I probably understand it a little better than you do. But,
I'm sure you do.
But nobody really understands it the way you understand organic chemistry. Nobody understands anything in biology the way you do in organic chemistry. Look, I was a chemistry major in college. I loved chemistry. I remember people saying, oh, organic chemistry is so hard. And I said, hard? It's fantastic. It all makes sense. What's hard about it? And I hated biology because it didn't make any sense at all. And then I decided to be a biochemist, which I liked because it was mostly chemistry. Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of a foreigner in biology as well, which may be why I see some of the problems that you see, but it doesn't prevent me from accepting the general idea of evolution, because that general idea of evolution does make sense in most circumstances. It doesn't mean we know all the details. We don't know all the mechanisms. I agree with that. But, I'm not going to say I'm against evolution, because that doesn't make sense to me either.
We do microevolutionary changes. I see it in my lab all the time. You work with bacteria, you're going to see it.
Absolutely.
But to have a body plan change as dramatic as an invertebrate to a vertebrate is that kind of change, and to have biologists just turn this thing on and they'll use this. Well, it's just the same as your microevolution, just on a larger scale. And I say, no, it's not the same as the microevolution. I can explain the microevolutionary changes. I can explain these small changes. I can't explain something like this, and I can't brush this thing over. So I just don't see it. And this makes a lot of my colleagues think I'm an idiot. They think I'm crazy. But
I don't.
But all I'm asking them to do is all I'm telling them is I don't see it. Explain it to me step by step, and they have no idea themselves.
So let me tell you something about this. This particular thing that you found. Remember, I said that when I was talking with Doug Axe on the McDowell show, we had a particular debate, and it was exactly about this, about the whole genome duplication that has been postulated to result in vertebrates. And that's why I was quoting this. Mm-hmm. And what Doug said to me is, is there any evidence that after that change, after any whole genome duplication, there are major molecular changes that you can identify that could lead to the evolution of vertebrates or anything else? And I said, oh, of course, there must be. I'm sure there are. I'm not an expert in this. Mm-hmm. So he said, well, go find it. And he said, and if you find it, I will become an evolutionary creationist. And I said, okay, I'll look for it. And when I find it, I'll expect you, if I don't find it, I will, whatever. We had a good time with it. So I went and I looked, and I was shocked because I couldn't find it. Mm. I couldn't find any evidence of a molecular nature that showed that after whole genome duplication, you actually get this large amount of mutation all over the place that could lead to things like, a spinal cord. Mm. So I said to myself, oh my goodness, he's right. And I had never really looked into it before.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Most people wouldn't admit that.
I met him again. He came to Washington and we went out to dinner.
Okay.
And I said, you know what, Doug? You were right. Mm. And it's amazing that you found exactly the same issue here. Mm. So you have a good point. And I think that the reason I originally said that was because that's what I was taught, and I just thought everybody knew that and everybody agreed with it, but I never looked into it. When I actually looked up the papers, they said almost the opposite. They said it's never been shown that a whole genome duplication results in a large-scale mutation event. My jaw dropped. And I just chose the first 10 papers at random that I found on, Google Scholar that said something about whole genome duplication and continuing mutations. And they were all consistent. So I started thinking, where did I get this idea from? I didn't make it up. Everybody says this all the time. But it's not real. It's not true. Yeah. So you're right. I'm not arguing with you in this case.
First of all, good for you for saying that, because most people don't back down. They will go to their death. Saying something and not changing. But the other thing is it shows how much is said in the scientific literature that has become dogma, and has become the common word, and it's just flat out wrong. It's just flat out wrong. I don't know if you've seen this recent paper that came out by Krishnamurti, where he just blows apart the whole foremost reaction synthesis of sugars, which was
I did. I did see that.
Basic. I mean, and this changes everything. And now there's no more route to making sugars. Yeah. That's a very big deal. People say, okay, well, one paper. No, this was the way to make sugars. Yeah. There's no more sugars being made. You can't get ribose, you can't get nucleotides, you can't get DNA, you can't get RNA. That's a big setback for origin of life.
Yes, it is.
And everybody says, and in fact, I just was interviewing another chemist, and he had, in a recent blog, he had quoted that, foremost reaction makes sugars.
Right.
And that's where I heard it. A colleague of mine said foremost reaction makes sugars.
Exactly.
I studied the foremost reaction papers. I studied Benner's paper. And I said, this looks odd to me. I'm looking over his data. I'm not seeing the sugars. I see a big mess that could never be used. And people thought I was crazy.
Yep.
But now Krishnamurti has investigated it, and he's coming up with the same thing. So yes, there's many things in science that people grab onto, and it turns out to be false.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this happens to all of us. Anyway, this is an interesting book. What I appreciate, Sy, is that we don't have to be enemies. And I have friends that are old Earth creationists, friends that are young Earth creationists, and I get along with all of them. I taught from the book of Genesis. People came out of that where after I taught from Genesis chapter 1, they said, "So where do you stand on this thing?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you where I stand. I put both of them out there, and you decide. You decide what you want to do."
Right.
And I presented this, and so people get upset with me because they want me to set a stake in the ground, to take a position, so that then they can either embrace me or shun me. And it's hard for me to take positions on these sort of things. Now, there are other things I take positions on. I think that the Earth does rotate about its axis, and it does go around the sun, and so we're not arguing that point anymore. And there's things in 500 years, Sy, people are going to look back and they're going to say, you know what these guys were arguing about 500 years ago? I mean, look at this and the silliness of what they were arguing about. So, science evolves, science changes, and we get more data points.
Constantly.
But I appreciate your writing this book and putting forward this idea that look, we've got to all get along here, and sometimes we hold fast to something, and this thing that we were holding fast to, it's no longer the same. As you say, evolution has been evolving. In fact, after random mutation and natural selection, then it went to it went to this neutral drift and universal common descent.
Right.
And now you're bringing in these other things of cognition, which Dennis Noble has been putting out. So it's changed again. So yeah. Thank you, Sy.
Yeah.
I mean, you take on dangerous issues and you put them out there.
Well, as you said, I'm not as old as Dennis Noble, but I'm old enough not to be worried. Nobody can do anything to me.
Yeah,
I'm retired, so why not? And I think it's important because, in this culture we tend, it's what you said just now. People either want to love you or hate you. You're either on their side or you're against them. And this is true in everything, in politics, science, religion, everything. And we got to get out of that. I mean, that's not the way Christians are supposed to be. We're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to love our enemies, not just everyone else. And how do we do that if we define so many people as enemies? And so I'm against that. And that's why, I want to have more dialogue with people like Doug Axe, because first of all, it turns out he's often right and I'm wrong, and more dialogue with everybody. And if you look at the back of the book, or wherever it is, somewhere in the beginning of the book, you'll see who's endorsed this book. And it's people from BioLogos, from Discovery Institute, from Reasons to Believe. And although it's not in the book, I've had positive comments from young Earth creationists even. So, why is that? And people have noticed that. And that is because at no point do I ever say, I'm right, you're wrong, go away, I hate you. Just the opposite. I'm saying, we are all one in Christ. I mean, Paul said that 3 or 4 times. It doesn't matter whether you're Greek or Jew or male or female or slave or free. We're all one in Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And he could have added, whether you're young Earth creationist or evolutionary creationist, we're all one in Christ.
Yes.
And that's one of the main themes of the book, I think. I hope that comes out.
No, that does come through, and young Earth creationists have sometimes been very upset with me because I didn't embrace it as strongly as they would want me to. And they come with the accusation that it's heresy, that one can even lose their salvation over this thing. And that's to me, that I don't know
bad.
how these people can say that, because God is the one who decides this, and God has made very clear what it is to be saved. Is that we have to believe in our heart, that we have to confess Jesus as Lord and believe in our heart He's risen from the dead, and you shall be saved. It's very clear.
Amen.
And so these are other issues that are not as important, and that does not mean that we lessen we devalue the Scriptures, that we devalue these sorts of things.
Not at all.
We take these sorts of things, and I take the Scriptures very seriously. But just like that verse that I showed you from Psalm 104, where it says, the earth is upon its foundations and it does not move, there's different ways of interpreting that.
That's right.
And you interpret something a little bit differently. And so now, you could say, okay, well, God must have meant that there are physical laws here and they don't change, or His ways with us as people don't change. God doesn't change in that sense. And so there's different ways of interpreting that same verse. And that doesn't mean that one person is wrong because they don't agree with my interpretation. So anyway, you probably get emails. I get a lot of emails from people that disagree with me. In fact, there's going to be people that when we come out with this video, they will write to me and they'll be like, how could you have interviewed that guy, Sy Garte?
Oh, yeah.
Because they assume that whoever I speak to, I have to have agreed 100% with them. I'm like, hey, I'm in a university. This is what we do. We get diverse thought. I interview all sorts of people. And so, but there'll be people upset that I interviewed you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And people are upset with me on all sides. I mean, I knew this was going to happen. I know this is going to be a very controversial book for everybody. But there are people who are reading it and saying, That's a really refreshing point of view. So that's what I'm hoping for.
I appreciate it.
But I do want to say one thing about Scripture. Yes. You didn't mention one of the chapters, which I think is important, where I talk about inheritance being the key biological mechanism that allows for evolution. Without accurate inheritance, you cannot have evolution. So, and when I talk about that, I quote Scripture, because there's a verse in Genesis that is repeated about 20 times, which young earth creationists use all the time. It's each according to its kind.
Yeah.
And that to me is the scriptural evidence that inheritance, goats only give birth to goats, sheep only give birth to sheep, every animal only gives birth to itself. No individual animal ever evolves. Evolution only happens in populations. So the idea that each animal is according to its kind is critically important for biological science. And that's one of the most important verses in Genesis, because it's repeated so often.
Good. Yes. So, and I want to give you again another last word. If you have anything else that we've left out, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I like to say as the last word is, why am I doing all this? I've written 3 books. The first one is about my journey to faith from an atheist. The other is about science and faith and harmony, and now this one. And the purpose behind all of them is fairly straightforward and simple, and that is to try to destroy forever and bury the myth and lie that science and Christian faith are at odds with each other, and you can't have both. So this is still a pervasive idea being taught often in academia by atheist professors. It's being taught occasionally by some of the people you mentioned in some radical churches who are saying, no, science is wrong, you can't follow science. Both of those groups are completely wrong. Science and faith go beautifully together. They're in perfect harmony. And that's why all the original scientists were deeply devout Christians. I mean, every single one of them, there's no exceptions. There was no atheist scientists at the beginning of science, up until the end of the 19th century. So that myth has to be destroyed. And not just me, there are quite a few folks who are writing books and papers and essays on this theme. And I think it's something we really have to get across, especially to students and young people who are brought up Christian and wondering if they can go into science or not, because does it conflict with my faith? And the answer is no, it doesn't.
Yes, and we need more Christians coming into this business.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. To show other generations that you can love Jesus and do good science.
Absolutely. Amen.
Thank you for joining me today. If you could give us a like, share, or podcast review, we would appreciate it. If you have any questions, you could send them to ask@jesusandscience.org, and we'll try to answer some of those questions in an upcoming video. And if you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you want to hear about why I believe, send me an email to tour@drjamestour.org, and we'll get together by Zoom, and I'll share with you why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus Christ.